when you are training and you get all those feel-good endorphins through the body, can it become addictive? And how do you know when you are overtraining? Well, Dr. Diane Cooper is with us. She's a clinical exercise physiologist. And Diane, you're very welcome to the programme. Good morning.
Hi, Will. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, if somebody enjoys exercise, that's well and good and should be encouraged. But how do you know how much is too much?
So that is actually a great question. So exercise, whether you're a solo exerciser, so just doing your own thing for health, or whether you're, committed to teams or whatever it is, ultimately it should add to your health. So it should increase fitness, increase strength, increase your wellness, increase your mental health. It should have a knock-on effect, a positive effect then on how you feel and how you interact with people and, social interactions and all of that type of stuff. So it should have a very, very, very positive effect on your health and on your wellness. But when it doesn't, that's when we need to have a think about things. So, but here's the thing. So there's kind of different phases. So when people get into exercise at the start, we'll say, you will inevitably make mistakes in training where you'll overdo it, where you won't incorporate enough recovery, where you'll cause yourself some types of injuries, or maybe if you're really overdoing it and your immune system is under pressure, you'll pick up kind of chronic colds and flus and things like that. And over time, if you don't address that, that will absolutely lead to some problems for yourself. But that is just a case of inexperience. You need education, you need experience, you need coaching, you need somebody to help you make your way through that if you don't happen to be a clinical exercise physiologist, obviously, because that's what people like us would do. But they're inevitable training mistakes. And over time, of course, as with all mistakes we make in life, the purpose is to not repeat them and to learn from them and to get better from them. But for sure, if your training is detracting from health over a long period of time, so like if you absolutely cannot miss a training session, and if you are exercising through pain, if you are pushing and pushing in every session so that they're really hard, really intense sessions, if you're causing yourself chronic injuries and you're just ignoring them and you just keep pushing, and it's really starting to affect you physically and mentally, well, then you're really gone into the overtraining at all costs.
But all of that sounds like common sense that we should notice. But, and I speak from experience here, Diane, very often in the moment, you think that little niggle in the Achilles, for instance, that's something that I can and should power through. It's my fault that I didn't stretch after the last run. It's not a sign of overtraining, and I don't want to take the easy way out here. There can be a guilt associated with missing a session.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose this is where the education and the coaching comes in, because, going back to your Achilles niggle, it mightn't have been, it very likely wasn't a simple thing of you just didn't stretch once. It was very likely because of chronic overloading. Maybe you weren't strong enough or fit enough to do what you were doing over a long period of time. Maybe recovery strategies weren't good. Maybe you weren't considering all of the other stresses and strains in life, like, up, 5 nights a week with kids who don't sleep, all sorts of stuff that comes into life. But all of this should be integrated into a kind of well-balanced program. And, that's really interesting what you say, Will. Like, people, when it comes to lifestyle habits like nutrition or like training or weight or whatever it is, people, you're very quick to kind of blame themselves. Well, I should know better. I should know how to do this. But the reality is, like, I've spent 25 years studying this, and I've worked with thousands of people in my one specific domain, which is exercise. And I'm still learning and training. So it's not something that is common sense. It's actually scientific application. So I know exactly where you're coming from, but I would urge people not to be so hard on themselves, because we have professionals in nutrition, professionals in exercise, professionals in injury and rehabilitation. We have, and for a good reason, because they're very specific types of science and education and training. And I suppose, what I would say to you is, if people are experiencing these things, It's up and down, they're fine. Everyone will get it wrong. But if there are chronic issues, if you're chronically getting injured, chronically in pain, this type of stuff, well, I think at that point it would be a very good idea to get some coaching from someone who can help you, because there is something gone wrong in your training program there, and it's likely something that either you don't know, or it's maybe you just need that little bit of expert guidance so that it doesn't happen again. So don't be hard on yourself, and use the professionals if they're there for you.
Yeah, and I suppose the physical indicators are the most obvious in some ways, because you will as a person feel those, but some of the obsessive behaviours that can develop, they may be more obvious to the people around you who are missing you. And I remember Brezzi shared a story of how when he was really intensely training in cycling, he would miss family occasions because he had to go out on the bike that evening, or whatever the commitment was. And that really, I suppose, you have to self-check, but you also need to be open to what your family might say to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, Will. And look, my background is ultra endurance, so I absolutely understand this side of things. And any professional athletes out there, not saying I was one, but anyone, they will understand the sacrifice and the commitment, as will their families and their close loved ones. So yeah, I totally get that. And here's the thing, like, if you're going to take on these type of monstrous challenges, like just as an example, one of my own was kayaking around Ireland. That was a 40-day event. That is not something that you can do, and it's not safe for you to take on these types of events unless you put in the appropriate training. That is going to take a commitment, and it's going to take dedication, but importantly, it should take communication with all of the people that are close to you in your life, so that they understand, look, this is what's happening for a specific period of time. This is the way it just has to go to keep me safe and keep me well and get me home to you in one piece, which I've had to have this conversation a number of times myself. But for sure, the reality of those types of commitments is it does impact other people. And this is where communication is very important. I don't, everyone has their own situations, but just if for 30 seconds, my current one is I have two small kids. Obviously I've been training all my life, and my husband has as well. I'm running a business. There's a whole pile of things going on. And for both of us to train, and we need to do that to keep ourselves healthy and well and strong for us, but for our children as they grow up. This takes actually its own commitment, where we have to sit down and look at schedules every week to see when can one of us train, when does the other person train, when can we involve our children in this, when is the family time, and if someone has a heavy training load one week, then it's balanced up on another week with somebody else. So when you're responsible for a unit, a family unit, yes, obviously we want people to train and be active and be well and healthy and add years to your life and all of the rest of it, but you can't really do that independently, and it does require communication and consideration of everyone involved, which is absolutely possible. But for the ultra endurance people out there, and for the highly competitive, where there's a lot of commitment, it takes equal commitment to your family to try and navigate that so that it adds to the family and doesn't take away from it. And that would be quite important.
Some interesting text from listeners. So one really stressing it's not just men who tend to develop these fixations. Women too can get addicted to the endorphins or the feelings or whatever good results exercise can produce. In your experience, is it both, or is it more one than the other?
It's both, Will. Now look, in my experience, in my world, it's actually, the prevalence of this is quite small in my world. There's a much greater prevalence of people not exercising and obviously trying to get them into exercising. But no, it can definitely be both. Again, in all my years, but then is it overtraining, or is it sometimes making poor decisions? Like, just for example, 20 years working as a consultant in this space, I've had people come to me straight from hospital who were admitted for pneumonia, and they're coming to me from hospital for training. I've had people who are running ultras, they're running on injuries, and they want to up their training load because something else is coming down the line, even though from a health perspective this is just really not a good idea. So there are two examples. I could give you a whole pile of examples of the poor decisions that people make.
Well, let me add one to it, actually, because Ciara says her flaw when she started training was keeping to the same precise routine all the time. Didn't have variety in what she was doing, so that led to strain, but also it became monotonous and the joy was lost. So, again, variety matters in training.
So this is where your coach is really important. What you've just described from this listener, and thank you very much for that text, it's a typical mistake I see time and time and time again, particularly with beginners. And that's okay because you're not experts in training and you're trying to figure it out. So this is where proper advice and coaching comes in. But yes, if you continue to do the same thing, at the same, the same runs, the same times, the same training environments. If you do the same thing all of the time, you will reach a point where you no longer adapt, and you're really running the risk of overtraining, injuries, and that staleness, and that just really losing the zest for it completely. So just linked to that, let me tell you the number one mistake that's made, and it's linked to what we're talking about, is that when I look and assess training programs, I see people are very prepared to train. And I'm looking for that little element of recovery that should be built into every single training program. That window that allows your wonderful body to rest and recover and adapt from all of the positive training stress you've placed on it. And it's usually that what we find is missing. So that is the problem. And when that is repeated month after month after month in your training month, where there's lots of training but there's no recovery built in, that's where eventually you will, and it could be 6 months later, where you start to get I've just really lost the zest for this. I'm just not that bothered with it. I'm just, I keep getting sick. I keep getting injuries. Usually it's too much overload and too little recovery. And that's the major problem I see in training plans, whether you're a beginner or whether you're an ultra endurance athlete. I see it across the board. So that's certainly something to consider, because it's that, of course, in life as well, it's those recovery periods that keep us well and let us recover and repair from stressful times in life as well.
Yeah, I see a lot of parents remarking on how particularly teenagers or people in their early 20s, they may train for soccer and then they train for football and then they train for hurling or rugby, or, they're multi-sports, and while each individual training plan may be appropriate, the combination is too much, and you have to be mindful of that. And it even reminds me, obviously I'm past that age now, I'm in my 40s, but you try and have your formal, if you like, exercise of a jog or a gym session, but you have to remember when you go out in the garden and you kick football with a 10-year-old and you're sprinting and you're changing direction, that all of that places a strain on the body too. That's not recovery.
Absolutely, and it probably is a stressful exercise situation if we haven't done it for a while, but also wonderful for the family time, of course. But that issue you just mentioned, Will, I taught sports science students for many years, and they're coming into me at kind of 17 years of age, and over those years, of course, a lot of the really good players, they're really strangled playing on multiple teams. What should happen there is somebody should be overseeing the multiple training sessions and competitions that they have. And in an ideal world, there should be communication for what their optimal overload is in any week or month. Of course, that's not happening. You'd need to be at very, very, very high levels to get that type of support. But that can also happen to other people. So let me just give you one last example of my mom. My mom is coming up on 70 years of age. She started training with me when she was in her 50s. And she's done lots of different things. But in the last few years, she has really gained a lot of friends who are pulling her into things like pickleball, and they're pulling her into, which is a great thing, into badminton. She does weights classes with us. She's also taking on the Camino, I think it's Camino Limerick. It's a 35k walk. She actually has so much training in her week right now. I had to sit down with her and actually look at her whole training schedule to make sure that she doesn't get overtrained, and we've had to pull back on certain things and increase others because she has to be fit to walk 35 kilometres, which is going to be about 7 hours for her. She's 70 years of age. The same principles apply. So luckily she has someone that will do that for her, but the same principles apply to the children. And, you know, ultimately my goal is to keep her safe and well, let her get the health benefits from it, let her do all of the social things she wants, but her big goal is this kind of 35k walk, and I need to make sure that she's strong enough for it and fit enough for it, she gets no injuries, and she has a great time while she's doing it. And those principles apply to every single situation we've just been talking about.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is get advice, but keep your ears open to the people around you as well. They see what you don't.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid in recovery. Do not be afraid of recovering and minding yourself, whether that's training or in life. That's just so important.
Dr. Diane Cooper of EduFit, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Will.
Diane is based in County Laois if you ever wish to pick her brain. She is a clinical exercise physiologist.